All right, recording is in progress, is what my computer is telling me. And hello, everyone. Welcome to Barrett and Baxa, another fantastic episode. I'm Steve Barrett. Bob Baxa, trust me, is going to be joining me in just a few minutes. But for now, it's just me for the moment telling you what is coming up on this episode of the B&B, as we lovingly call it here in my household. Now, when you're putting together a media commentary show like we do, there are a lot of stories to tell, and a lot of times it's hard to know what to leave in and what to leave out, as the great Bob Seger used to say. So we leave a lot of content on the cutting room floor, and each week we seem to want to put everything into the pile, but we want to also keep it at about a half an hour for each show. So we've got to leave something out. So this week we want to do some cleanup. But before we get started here, I want to invite anyone listening, please subscribe to the podcast or subscribe to the channel. If you're watching it on YouTube, watching on Spotify or listening on Spotify, maybe it's Apple Podcasts, whatever the platform, please, if you can just subscribe to us, that always helps us generate some new listeners, new viewers. And also give us your comments. We want to know, we want to be rated. We want to find out what you're thinking about this podcast, maybe some of your thoughts on what you might like us to cover. So let's go ahead and get started on it. Today, we're going to offer up some of the unseen and unheard conversations about the media landscape and also the collapse of journalism. We'll tell you how a story as simple as a Walmart in your neighborhood could give you a gauge on whether you're listening to a real journalist or maybe just some hack. We're also going to, Bob and I, make our predictions about the future of the two political parties in our country that seem to take up all of the media oxygen. That sure gets a little bit annoying. But we'll be talking about toupees as well. Yes, toupees that go up here on your head. Who should be wearing them and who should not? But we're going to start right now with a conversation about the bloated nature of our government here in the good old US of A. Small government versus large government, and your opinion on which is better, small or large. I'm going to guess you think small.
I do think small, and my theory is that government is bad at everything it does. Every time the government's involved, it fucks up everything. Everything good that we have in our lives comes from private businesses. And if you look back on all the inventions, like there's a famous video on the internet, I think it's Milton Friedman, saying that we didn't get the telephone from some government bureaucrat. We didn't get the light bulb from some government bureaucrat. We got these from private individuals working privately, starting a company and giving us these great inventions. And so certain things, yes, of course, we have to have taxes for. We're not going to build our own road. We're not going to have our own army. So we're going to agree on some things to come together, pool our money and pay taxes to pay for those things. But I think that taxes should be at the lowest possible rate, and that things like charity can be handled by private entities like the Salvation Army. And the reason I think that is because what I think is a good use of my money for charitable purposes might not be what you think is a good use of your money for charitable purposes. So I feel like a lot of the things that are done to help less fortunate people can be done by private charities. And government should be kept as small as we can possibly keep it and still have it functioning. So,
all right. So my opinion is that I really believe that states and smaller governments should be doing things the way that the people in those communities want them to do it. And that kind of leads to smaller governments and more smaller governments. Because I think that if one, like let's take the education department, for example, if one state is doing significantly better than another state at spending their money and getting a good product, the student, really the intelligence of the student is the product that they're creating. If that state is doing it so much better than, let's say, Florida's doing it better than Alabama. Alabama can go to Florida and say, hey, what are you doing? It's a best practices thing. And if it all comes from the top down, you don't have that best practices competition. And you can't say, well, how does our federal, I mean, right now we're comparing our federal government to other governments, like state governments. And that's why, like when you talk about states, we have a bunch of states for a reason so that they can all compete against each other and sort of test the waters and test policies. And I think that is why smaller government to me, or smaller governments making the decisions. So it's not, so to me, government would actually be a little bit more robust because from the state, then you could say, hey, what county does this better? Or what similar city within our state is doing it better than another similar city within our state? And then it goes all the way
Right.
down to school boards and HOAs, and really it's just a best practices thing. So
Well, I mean, the left wing mindset, the leftist mindset on this is that there's everything should be handled by the government. Like, really, I think that most people on the left would approve of a government commission on it. Shouldn't the government come in and check that you're wiping properly? I mean, that is the mindset of the left. Small government is better. All right.
what has happened to journalism in
Yes,
our
this is a good
country?
one.
And
Yeah, this is a
how
good
has it
one.
happened? Because you and I are both from broadcasting, radio and television. You're radio, you're radio and television, and I'm radio or television. But I watched it happen within newsrooms, and I saw the collapse of media trust, and I think it dates for me all the way back to the 2000 election when Bush and Gore, it was such a contentious election that even the media started really taking sides on who won that election. And I think that's when the real partisan divide in this country came about, because I don't recall that there were a lot of people that hated Bill Clinton people, but or hated George Bush people or Al Gore. Gore was running, but I don't recall that
Right.
when Clinton was president, everyone hated him for his policies and hated every single thing that he did. They didn't like
No.
Monica Lewinsky. They didn't like certain policies that he had, but for the most part, government was able to work together until that point, and that's when the media sort of started to divide, and media outlets were able to dictate to their journalists what they were going to say or what their opinion were going to say. And at the same time, because of financial pressures, these companies were hiring cheaper and cheaper people,
Yeah.
younger and younger people in newsrooms that really hadn't developed any kind of opinion and also weren't taught to be unbiased. At one point, we started teaching journalists or stopped teaching journalists to be unbiased. And I think the confluence of events caused us to be where we are now, which is really you have to, from a media consumption perspective, you have to choose one side or the other because there's no middle anymore.
No. And I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with social media. A lot of the reporters think, well, first of all, reporters don't think of themselves. You're an old school reporter where you have even made it a point of saying if you were doing a story on a Walmart being put into the neighborhood where you live, and you didn't want it because you felt there would be too much traffic, you would try to err on the side of almost sounding a little bit more positive about the Walmart so you wouldn't be accused of being biased. Whereas now, if the reporter doesn't want it, the reporter's going to come right out and be like, clearly a Walmart in this neighborhood would be bad for traffic, and clearly children's lives will be at risk. Like, they will just give their opinion right in the story.
And
they think they are activists, and they think they're supposed to be selling a particular side of the story, not just reporting on it.
And I think the journalists that are elevated to a higher level in terms of TV or radio or even podcast personalities are the ones that get really good at it. So instead of making it really obvious, they use words like, the people who want the Walmart claim that there will be no effect on traffic. So
Yeah.
that one word, claim, instead of saying say that there will be no effect on traffic, claiming, when you say, oh, someone claims that there will be no effect,
A claim sounds like
that
bullshit.
means they're
A
lying.
claim-
It means they're lying.
that sounds like you're lying.
Yeah.
A claim is something. I claimed that I had sex with a supermodel last night. You can tell that I probably did. A claim is something that is pretty iffy and probably didn't happen. You're 100% right.
And
they use words like that. They claim there will be no traffic, but we all know that clearly there will be. And yes, they think of themselves as advocates for one point or another. And this brings us to Trump. The media hates Trump so much that they cannot allow any story to portray Trump in a positive light. So everything has to be presented as a negative story. If Trump says drink more water, they will say Trump is advocating for a dangerous amount of water consumption that is clearly bad for you.
If Donald Trump came on TV at noon today and said, I'm resigning, I don't want to do this anymore. I love golf. I'm leaving. I'm going to go play golf. The left would go nuts and say, he's quitting. I can't,
Right.
He's quitting on us. He's leaving everybody hang. He let everybody down. They would complain about him actually resigning and saying, you know what, maybe my ideas aren't the best. I'll just step away. He'd still be hated for that. That's how bad people on the left hate Trump. But there are also as many people
Really
on the
weird.
right that Trump can do no wrong. And I think we have to I think the Trump administration right now is to the point where we can start calling them out for things that aren't necessarily
I can explain here. Let me explain that real quick. And this is what's going on. This is when people talk about Trump supporters being in a cult. Here's what I think is happening. You know how, let's say you have a brother who's a complete loser and he's a drug addict and you're constantly complaining about how bad he is. And when you talk to your sister, the two of you are just trashing your brother. Can you believe what a loser he is? God, we're so sick of him. But then you go out to a bar and you're standing there with your friends and you overhear another person trashing your brother and you immediately turn and stick up for your brother because it's fine if you're saying something bad, but you don't want to allow a stranger to say something bad about your brother. And I think that mindset, Trump supporters are so sort of sensitive about all the criticism of Trump that they refuse to allow even legitimate criticisms to get through. And you're right, there are people that Trump can do no wrong, but there's just as many people that say Trump can do no right.
Now, right. Bob, I want to do something now that we're going to try to do regularly, and that's actually kind of make predictions. And then because this show is going to go on and on and on for years, we'll be able to go back and check our predictions against what actually happened.
Okay.
So I want to start with, what is your prediction of what's going to happen with the Republican Party as a whole over the next 8 years? So Trump's kind of era has ended, and in 6 to 8 years, where will the Republican Party stand?
I think that Trump has remade the party into something completely different. I think, and I don't really consider myself a Republican. I dislike the old style Republicans. But the old, when I was growing up, my parents were Democrats in the sense of like Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, the Democrat Party. And by the way, before I go any further, I say Democrat Party, and here's why. You're not the Democratic Party. You don't get two different words. You call yourselves Democrats. The noun is Democrat. You don't get a separate word for adjective. We get one word on the Republican side. You're a Republican, the noun, and the Republican Party, the adjective. You don't get to have two words. So if you want to call yourselves Democratics and make that your noun, then I will call your party the Democratic Party. Until you do that, you get one word, and that is Democrat. So your party is the Democrat Party, and F you if you don't like it.
And if you want to be called Democratic, you should probably use a democratic process to choose your nominee.
Exactly. Like have a primary. But anyway, so when I was a kid, Democrats were the party of the working class. My father was a teacher. My mother's a housewife. We live in a blue collar, very middle class town. Of course, we're Democrats. Republicans were the people at the country club, the rich people, the wealthy people. And it was set in stone. If you're rich, you're a Republican. If you're middle class or poor, you're a Democrat, or black, you're a Democrat. And Trump has completely turned that on its head. I now believe that the Republican Party is the party of the working class. The Democrats have gone so insane with their stupid social policies that they are now the party of the ultra wealthy coastal elites and the utterly helpless poor people who can't do anything for themselves and are 100% dependent on the government. Everything from the working poor all the way to the upper middle class that whole stretch of people, which is hundreds of millions, certainly tens, if not hundreds of millions of people, all those people now identify more with the Republican Party. That's going to continue. I think the Trumpification of the Republicans will continue. And I think every candidate, certainly for the next 20 years on the Republican side, is going to have to kiss the metaphorical Trump ring in order to sort of be thought of as MAGA approved. And I think the Democrats will continue to splinter. And I don't even know if the Democrat Party can continue. I mean, it's destroying itself right in front of our eyes with these stupid social policies that nobody likes. I mean, the Democrats take on every 80-20 issue or 90-10 issue, the Democrats inevitably take the 20 side, even though their own constituents are on the 80 side. So that's where I see things going.
All right. I see, and I kind of am watching it before my eyes. I see that the Republicans are going to start to go with a never-ending campaign strategy where if you notice, you're seeing all over, at least if you watch like cable news and things like that. I'm not sure that I've seen it a lot on social media and stuff like that. I'm sure you have, but these commercials that look just like a campaign ad, and it's touting all of Trump's accomplishments and so on and so forth, because I think they're going to want to keep their political operations very nimble, like they were during the campaign when they came up. Biden calls Republicans garbage, Republican voters. He jumps in a garbage truck. Kamala says she worked at McDonald's. Trump really goes and works at McDonald's. So things like that. A good example is recently they had the ridiculous video of all of the female congresswomen acting like superheroes or video game superheroes, and immediately a super PAC or a PAC came out with an ad saying the Americans already picked their fighters, and here they are. And it was the whole cabinet. It was a very well done ad. So, the Democrats are still doing like these cheap ads trying to figure out social media, which I didn't expect because the old Republican Party had no idea about social media. They weren't doing anything. They didn't know how to do it or what to do. Now the Republicans seem to have taken advantage of that. And I think the campaign's not going to stop. And I think if Donald Trump wants to, he will morph those into J.D. Vance ads so that as we get closer to the next election, the first we go to the midterm, and it'll be about Republicans have done this in Congress and Republicans have done that. And then after the midterms, I think the Republicans will have very strong midterms. We'll see if that happens. But then it will shift to whoever Trump wants next. And if it's J.D. Vance, I think he's going to want to say, look, this is the vice president that I picked, and this is the guy that's going to continue with my policies. I think those ads will start to include J.D. Vance more, and J.D. Vance will be sitting in more of those meetings in front of the media, and he'll kind of become what Elon Musk is always kind of there in the background of all the press conferences now, almost, even if he's not in the room.
Right.
I think J.D. Vance will become more of that, and then the Republicans will just sort of, I don't want to say force him down everybody's throat, but I think there could be a primary that could be competitive, but that Vance will sort of be the front runner from the beginning and be the front runner through the end, and Republicans will go back to more of a Reagan-esque policy of don't bash other Republicans.
Right.
We're not going to bash America overseas. We're not going to go on a tour and we're not going to apologize for the way that America acted, just like Republicans will kind of find their niche and say, we don't talk badly about our own Republicans. Meanwhile, I think Democrats are going to have to eat themselves alive in the next presidential primary. I think they're just going to wing it for the midterm elections in 2.5 years or a year and a half. And they're going to try and focus on getting someone out there that I think will fail in the next presidential election, and they won't be able to find someone. And then there will be enough losses that someone will come out of nowhere and go, forget all of those divisive policies of the past. We are going back to the obvious center for this country. And could be somebody like John Fetterman, who, doesn't care. He doesn't need to get other Democrats to agree with him. Or
Right.
Newsom's trying to do it with his new podcast. Newsom's trying to say, "Oh, I'm going
Yeah.
to be the guy," but
He's so
everybody
full of
knows that
shit, man.
that's not true. So, okay, so there's the future of the Democrat, future of the Republican Party. We'll see, how much we're right about.
Well, I don't even think of myself as really that conservative. I'm just into common sense. Like the things we believe are just common sense. And the stuff that you guys believe just don't really make sense, which is why you guys are into censorship and shutting down the other side, I feel.
You used to be the other side, though.
I did, yeah.
You were when we met. So 10 years ago, no, 20
Right.
years ago when
20
we
years
met,
ago.
you were
Right.
absolutely the other side.
Full-time liberal. I used to make fun of people listening to Rush Limbaugh, and I even get Facebook messages sometimes, like Facebook memories now, where I said something like, "Oh, those Limbaugh Kool-Aid drinkers and all their conservative bullshit." So I have completely changed my feelings, and now to me, what the thing I hate the most, Democrats, and in fact, if you're a Democrat, you are banned from the show. You're not allowed to watch anymore.
Oh, come on,
right
Bob.
now. I'm
Hate
just
is
kidding.
a powerful word.
I want you to take a piece of paper and cover my face and only watch Steve's face if you're a
Right,
Democrat.
Because
You're
I'm the
not
one-
allowed to watch me.
Yeah, I'm the one in the middle, and I've always
Yes.
been in the middle. I was in the middle back when you thought that I was like some crazy right winger. You were like,
Because
"What?
you
Who
were.
is this guy
Yeah.
who doesn't want to spend money on homeless people?" And it wasn't that I didn't want to spend money on homeless people. It's that I thought that we were wasting money and spending it the wrong way on homeless people,
Which
and
is
that it
absolutely
could be
true.
spent in a much. But that's the problem that we have with politics, is that it always has to exist on a line. So either
Right.
you are here on the line or you're here on the line, but really it's a sphere. Like you can be on the line over here, but up here. I mean,
Correct.
on that homeless issue, for example, I always thought that money was just spent in the wrong way for homeless people.
Well, here, I'm an expert on being homeless. I was basically facing the final sort of thing that got me to the Salvation Army is that I was facing actual sleep on the street homelessness. I had been a drug addict for years. I had been on everyone's couch. And when you're, the people who are watching this who are drug addicts will know, you start off where you have your own apartment and then you fuck that up and you lose your apartment. So then you move in with somebody and you're paying rent. Then you fuck that up and you're no longer able to pay half the rent. Then you start going to like, "Hey man, can I like sleep on your couch for a couple of days?" And you get that, and that you make that last for a while. And then eventually you fuck that up. There's no more couches. There's no more friends willing to let you sleep on the floor. And at that point, believe me, I see how people become homeless. They want to get up in the morning, go panhandle for a couple of hours until they make enough money to get their first bottle, drink their first bottle or do their first bag of heroin, pass out from that, sleep a few hours, get up in the afternoon, panhandle a few more hours, get their bottle for the evening and drink that and pass out at night. That's the way they want to live.
But
So-
you say they, but I don't think that
Certain
it's
homeless
accurate.
people.
Yeah, I don't think it's accurate to say they're all in the same group. But I think
No,
that
but there are
the
some.
goal has to be to separate those people, because there's always going to be somebody who wants to live in the woods because they've got some warrant for their arrest in Ohio, and they don't want to walk into a homeless shelter and give an ID and not be
Right.
able to bring their friends and their cigarettes and their bottle and go to a regular homeless shelter. But there are also people that are absolutely willing to do that, and they've just got some mental illness that needs to be taken care of. So it's
and they can be helped. And that's the point of like what you were saying. We're spending money in the wrong way. It's not a one size fits all solution. You have to have different types of solution. There are certain homeless people that you cannot help. And so just throwing money at the problem is not going to, it's not going to solve homelessness. So I don't understand how it seems like everyone should agree. If we're wasting money, how is it a bad thing to point out, hey, we're wasting money over here? Like, why? And people are mad because they don't like the guy who found the waste. Like, that to me is crazy.
Right. And I think a lot of it has to do with it's so ingrained in our politics and our political system there in Washington that people just don't want to stop doing what they've always done. They've had these easy jobs. They don't really have to be accountable for anything. I found it fascinating that people were complaining about getting an email saying that you need to tell me what you did last week, where I come from a
Right.
business. I in a newsroom every morning when I was going to work as a journalist, I had to bring 3 ideas to the table every morning at 9 o'clock. You can't be late. You have to announce them in front of all these people. You get shot down a lot of times, sometimes out of 3 ideas that you have to bring to the table. None of them end up on
Right.
air and you get assigned to
Right.
something else. So it was embarrassing sometimes. You felt silly, but you had to come in every day, play your best game, and give it your best shot. And here they can't even come up with a week's worth of things that they did that week. And they're complaining about it. Now, a
What
million,
is the
million or
problem? Like,
more.
why are they so mad
It's
about
laziness.
talking
It's
about what you
government
did at work?
laziness. No, it's just laziness. These people don't really have work ethic and they don't want to have any work ethic and they haven't had to. So the only thing that they know is to lay down on the ground and like flail around and kick and
Right.
scream. I mean, and I'm not, and Bob, we've talked about this while you've drifted very far to the right. I've kind of stayed in the middle, right where I
Right.
was. I mean, I was what I believe to be a real journalist, a journalist that stayed unbiased and didn't have an opinion. So I've never registered as a Republican or a Democrat throughout my life. I
Right.
voted different ways, certainly, but to me, being a journalist was that you said, if I was doing a story as a journalist and it was about a Walmart in my neighborhood, and I just happened to be covering a Walmart in my neighborhood. If I wanted the Walmart to go in my neighborhood, in my story, I would side just a little bit more with the people that didn't want the Walmart, even
To
though
make sure
I
you
wanted
didn't
the
seem
Walmart.
biased.
Right,
Yeah.
to make sure that I didn't seem biased. And that
Yeah.
is how I was taught to be a journalist. I don't think that exists anymore. And so
No.
as they're covering Doge, all these journalists, and you can now separate journalism into left and right. I mean, there isn't
Absolutely.
really any down the center anymore. But
Nope.
journalists on the left are flipping out, while journalists on the right are saying, "Oh my gosh, look at all this fraud, waste, abuse, and all of that." And journalists on the left are, trying to protect the status quo. And that's just the way journalism is now. I don't even know if you can call it journalism. Maybe we don't even have journalism anymore.
They have to say Trump is wrong no matter what. And in the beginning, I didn't even like Trump that much. I thought he was a joke. Now, I did vote for Trump, but in the beginning, I thought his candidacy was just a joke. And the amount of hatred I get from people, I mean, we have mutual friends, people that no longer talk to me because I'm a Trump voter. It's very strange. And they are constantly saying I'm in a cult. I don't think it's a cult. I think it's a cult of Americans who are tired of America being last. Like, why can't America be first? What's wrong with America first? That brings us to
Well, I
the
think
whole
it's
Zelensky
changing.
thing.
I think it's changing. And before I had a little aside that I was thinking of. A lot of people don't understand. Like they talk about Trump and they talk about Trump's attitude toward the media, and they
Right.
say, "Oh, there's this term he uses called fake news." And a lot of people don't realize that the term fake news was not coined by Donald Trump originally.
Right.
It was
No.
actually coined by Hillary Clinton, and then it was parroted by liberal journalists who kind of bought into it. And so right now the what they called fake news back in 2016, and they tried to get that name to go, Democrats a lot try to come up with some catchphrase and
Right.
drive it down your throat, right? Well, at this
Yeah.
time it was fake news, and fake news referred to misinformation. So any
Yeah.
story that would come out about Hillary and her servers and things like that, well, that was disinformation and misinformation that we call fake news. So Hillary tried to coin the term fake news, and Donald Trump just grabbed it, turned it around, and pointed the finger right at the legacy media and said, "No, that's
Yeah.
the fake news." And then it took off in another direction. But Bob, the media landscape was changing a lot further
True.
back than even with Trump. And we're going to
Yeah,
get,
that's
that's
true.
what part of what this show, I think both of us want to be about. We're both media guys. We're both from
Yeah.
broadcast television and broadcast radio. And I think one of the things I want to talk about personally a lot on this show is how it all fell apart for the media, how it all came to this point. And I think there are some lines to be drawn, and hopefully we'll have some really good guests. By the way, if you're a
Yeah.
friend of ours or not a friend and you'd like to be a guest with us, email us, barrettandbaxa@gmail.com, because I know
Yeah.
that we have a lot of friends right
Story
now.
ideas.
Yeah, right
Anything.
now, as we record this episode, it's still a private podcast. So you,
Yeah.
you have to have an invite. It's for the chosen few, is what we like to
That's
say.
what we call it.
The
But
Barrett and Baxa podcast. But back to my point, it started a long time before Donald Trump came along, but Donald Trump just sort of found a way to take the American frustration with the media and use it to his advantage instead of fighting against it. Before that, every other Republican candidate would try and fight against that liberal lean on
yeah.
with journalists. But Trump was the first one that came along and said, "No, I'm going to point it out and I'm going to make fun of you for it." And
Yeah.
it became fun for so many people who sat and watched their TVs and read their newspapers and went, well, "This is half bullshit."
I think most people never really thought about the fact, if you go back to the days of there just being three networks, like even before Fox, you accepted whatever Walter Cronkite told you. And it didn't occur to you that Walter Cronkite had an agenda or that his producers had an agenda. But they did. The New York Times had an agenda going all the way back to the beginning. And it was always a liberal agenda. They were always going to be more positive about the Democrat and more negative about the Republican. And now there's so many places to go for news. I mean, Joy Reid is a good example. She was fired recently, and all the MSNBC hosts have gone on the air and they're crying. There was one, that guy, Lawrence O'Donnell, he compared her firing to civil rights workers marching on a bridge in Selma, Alabama. Like, dude, what are you talking? She makes $25 million, whatever amount of millions Joy Reid was making. Rachel Maddow makes $25 million.
And she can't break 1 million viewers on a night.
Right. It's just it's just economics. I mean, this is the same problem with local news. Local news gets money from selling advertising time. If there's no one watching the show, then if your sales department comes to my car dealership and says, "Hey, we want you to buy time at Channel 9," I'm going to say, "Let me see the ratings. I want to say, I'm trying to sell cars. If nobody's watching, I can't sell cars to them." Back when a shitload of people were watching, the sales department could say, "Look at these ratings. There's 1 million people watching." So the car dealer says, "Great. I'm going to advertise and 1 million people will see the ad and maybe 1,000 of them will buy a car." But if the sales department shows the ratings and the car dealer sees that only 100,000 are watching, it's 1/10. And he's like, "Well, damn, I know that only 1% maybe are going to buy a car from my ad. That the math is not adding up. Like, I'm going to advertise somewhere else that has more people watching." It's just simple economics.
And the funny thing is that the Rachel Maddow's and Lawrence O'Donnell's, they're going to complain about it all they want, but they're not going to give up any of their salary to try and spread it out so that Joy Reid can still have her job. That's not
Rachel
going to
Maddow
happen.
was crying about all the producers who are going to lose their job. She's making $25 million a year. She could easily say to MSNBC, "Let me just make $23 million. Take that extra $2 million and give it to all of Joy Reid's producers, and then none of them will be fired." But of course, she didn't do that. She went on the air and called her bosses at MSNBC racist. Of course, it's the race card. Apparently, these days, if a black person on TV gets fired, first of all, I don't think you're allowed to fire black people. I think that's maybe a new rule. Like, if you hire a black dude,
Well, clearly it's not.
You're not allowed to fire
It's
them.
not anymore.
Right, and
It was a year ago, but now
that
it's
is
not.
kind of weird that the only two people in primetime who kept their job were both white guys, Chris Hayes and
On
Lawrence
MSNBC.
O'Donnell. On this MSNBC.
Yeah.
Are you fine with Nancy seeing all your text messages?
Yeah, she can pick up my phone anytime and
Catherine too. I'm hiding nothing.
Yeah,
I'm
hiding.
these days
I'm too old to
is
hide
totally
anything.
boring. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm very bald. I mean, look at this gray beard. Holy crap. You know, I'm looking at my baldness on the camera here. It's a little annoying that you've gone not at all bald. Like, why? And actually, this is a perfect time to throw in a little lighthearted segment.
Sure.
About men wearing toupees. Why do men wear toupees? What is the point of wearing a toupee? Is this our good friend Bob Jordan has a pet peeve about men wearing toupees, and because he says they're always so obvious. Why not just be a bald guy? What is the point of putting a hat, basically a hair hat?
Yeah,
on your head?
I got to admit, a lot of times I am very bad at identifying a toupee.
Really?
Like I see someone and
great at
I can't, like, occasionally I do, but a lot of times I don't think I pay that much attention to people and their hair. Maybe it's because my hair's okay and I don't worry
it
about
doesn't
it.
bother
But
you.
I do know that there was an anchor that I worked with once, and I think it was actually while Bob Jordan was general manager at this television station, but he took his toupee off on air after years of wearing a toupee, and
No way.
he kind of outed him and said, "Look, I'm sick of wearing this thing." And it was a great episode, and it was the whole newsroom kind of gathered around him and said, "Hey, good for you." And
Really? This
yeah,
happened live on camera?
well, I don't recall if he took it off on camera.
It's a pretty big deal.
I think he just said, I've decided to take it off, and he just showed up one day and looked different than he did the day before. And he finished out his career. I mean, he was years on the air after that without the toupee, and I think he just got sick
As
of
a
it.
bald guy.
But again, I don't notice toupees, and so when people said,
See,
"Yeah,
I always
he's gonna take his
noticed
toupee
toupees.
off," I was like, oh, "He's got a toupee." So
You didn't even know he had a toupee.
I don't notice anything about anybody.
See, I always notice toupees. To me, they're so obvious, and no man has a hairline that goes like directly straight across. And you'll see a guy where his hairline is like this, and it just doesn't look natural. It looks very, very fake.
Black guys do. Black guys are.
They do.
A lot of them are
That's true.
blessed with that perfect line
Perfectly
that goes
straight.
straight
It's
across.
almost been carved in.
It's like God took a level and like leveled it and
Yes.
said, "That's where your hairline is going to be."
Yes.
Send a link to this podcast to any friends that you might think that might want to watch it.
Right.
As you're
Barrett and
listening.
Baxa at
Yep.
gmail.com. Send us suggestions. Feel free to tell us we suck. I mean,
Make
it would
fun
not be
of
the
us,
first time.
whatever you say, whatever you
Not
want.
the first time someone told me I suck. It will not be the last time. But yeah, this is great fun. We love that you guys are listening, and keep coming back for more.
Hey, and
We'll keep doing
hopefully we can find some more, because we have so many friends in the broadcast journalism field that hopefully we can bring some of those friends into the mix. We could talk to them about some of the issues of the day, about the collapse of journalism as we know it. But
Right.
as we move forward, this is going to be a fun thing that we're going to do, and hopefully everybody's going to like listening to it. So
Absolutely.
we'll say goodbye with that.